Hello, everybody, and welcome to BadgerPod Nerdcast. This is BadgerPod Nerdcast number 28. We're going to go on a field trip. And we're doing that specifically because we want to nerd out and look at Studio Ghibli. So we're going to look at Studio Ghibli films. But first, before we get right into that, I'm going to go ahead and go around and introduce everybody. So I'll start with myself, and then I'll pass the hot potato. My name is Brian Martinez. I was lucky enough to be chosen to be the host of the BadgerPod Nerdcast and the BadgerPod Gamergate, which I'm really thankful for. Thank you, everyone. And I also am a comic artist, a college student, and all kinds of other crap. So yeah, that's it about me. And I like nerding out about art stuff. I think my big dog in this race is the fight against censorship and authoritarian perspectives on creative people. That's where my passion comes from. And I will hand the ball off to Mad Cat. I'm handing the ball.
Hi, well, I was expecting a potato, but the ball is fine. Alright, so my name is Chris Voti. I am a writer. I'm also better known as Mad Cat. For whatever reason, Google Plus is giving me some trouble, so you can't see my usual mech today. I am a published writer. You can find my work on Amazon as well as Goodreads. I'm also the site administrator for goodguycomics.com as well as the forum guy. So you can also find me as the Angry Egalitarian on my own YouTube account where I like to get, well, angry and also talk about equality. And I'm going to go ahead and pass the hot potato ball to the other guy in here to be misogynistic.
Mike?
I guess that would be me. My turn to play with the hot potato ball. In case you're wondering why I show up as Mike rather than Dr. Randomacam, it's the same reason Mad Cat's not showing up as Mad Cat today. Because Google! Hi, I'm Dr. Randomacam. I'm a purveyor of silly things and seriously silly things and sillily serious things. You can find me on YouTube under the name Dr. Randomacam. As it sounds, I berate people for being stupid and hypocritical. It's fun. I'm going to pass the hot potato kangaroo ball to Rachel.
Hi. This is really hot. Hi, I'm Rachel Edwards. I do a lot of stuff in the back end. That sounds wrong. Doing writing for show notes for Honey Badger Radio. I also do some hosting, and I do some blogging at in the place in the link below, and I do the thing, and I'm gonna hand it over to Allison so that she can do the thing.
Yeah, well, until I came in, you had 3 guys, so I guess you would be doing some stuff in the back.
Oh my.
Oh Jesus. Okay. So my name is Allison. I apologize for not being here at the beginning of this show. I did something incredibly stupid. I did a redirect on my domain name to a sub-part of the domain name, and then I created this recursive domain monstrosity and destroyed what I had been creating for the past 2 days, which incidentally might be of interest to you guys who are listening. We are putting on a fundraiser because we are going to the Calgary Comics and Entertainment Expo, and I now have the fundraiser up to help us get Rachel, Brian, Hannah, and Anna Cherry to the actual event. So if you're interested in helping us out, the link will be in the low bar, and you can go directly to it at www.feedthebadger.com/projects/badgers -gone -wild -calgary -expo -style. And and I will put that in the low bar for you so that you can get there.
No, you have to
Nope.
memorize it.
Yeah, okay, yes, you're
memorize
right, you're right.
it.
We can't make this easy. You have to memorize that. But if just to give you a little idea of what we're planning, we plan to infiltrate nerd culture, cunningly disguised as their own, as nerds. Each of us has been carefully
We are
crafting.
nerds.
Well, yeah, no. Yeah, actually, exactly, Rachel.
Nerds
Exactly.
disguised as not nerds, disguised as nerds.
Yeah, no. Yeah, no.
Plus,
Yes.
question,
I'm actually a penguin.
Each of us has been carefully crafting a persona of nerdiness through decades of dedication to comics, science fiction, fantasy, comedy, games, and other geekery, waiting for this moment, our moment to slip among the unaware. Once there, we'll start distributing the totalitarian message that nerd and gamer culture is perfectly wonderful just as it is and should be left alone to go its own way. Okay,
Is that before or after the lube?
Well, Allison, I lied. I'm actually a penguin disguised as a panda.
Disguised as a nerd.
Yeah, there we go.
So it's sort of some sort of creatureception there going on.
Yeah.
It's all black and white to me.
It's all
I'm a turducken.
I'm a turducken. We're all actually a bunch of fried and baked foods that are pretending to be human.
And then that nerd is disguised as a badger.
Okay, well, the recursion, this is actually very apropos to the recursion that destroyed my website, because now we're creating recursions that are destroying my mind, so, okay, moving on.
Let me save you from this, unless you have something to say.
Yeah, go donate. If you've wanted to donate one time at this point, like if you've come up to this point in time and wanted to you were just waiting for some project that we were doing, that we had under wraps, and you wanted to just donate once to us, then go donate with this, and go take a look and see what we're up to, yeah, and help out.
And we'll make you things.
Yes, we'll make you things. There are things available to be rewarded for stuff.
We like making things here.
I'm already coming, folks. So no need to worry on that front. I am so already coming.
Just get the paper towels ready and we'll be fine.
Okay.
Well, I thank you because I'm a very lazy person, so I like when you do all of the work.
Okay.
Maybe a ShamWow? I don't know. It's hard to gauge the amount of moisture that's going to be around.
Okay. So, yes, you guys should do that, because I would like to come as well. I hear it. I think it would be great. So, let's get into the show, unless there's something else anyone wants to say before I go. I'm going to go ahead and get right into it. We're just going to keep it.
I'm not coming.
Light and fluffy, and we're just going to talk a little bit about Studio Ghibli. So I'm going to go ahead and read the little blurb I have. So Studio Ghibli and rethinking animation. The name Ghibli was given by Hayao Miyazaki. He's the brain behind Studio Ghibli. The Italian noun Ghibli is based on the Arabic name for the Sirocco, or Mediterranean wind, the idea being the studio would blow a new wind through the anime industry. Founded after the success of the 1984 film Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, the studio has produced such incredible films as Princess Mononoke, Castle of Cagliostro, or I might be mispronouncing that, Porco Rosso, and Kiki's Delivery Service, amongst many others. What we are discussing today is which of these films are our favorites and why. All of the Ghibli films are expertly crafted, hand-animated, and much of the work references real life. Miyazaki has always held his studio to these very, very high standards. So now, this is how brief it is. Now I open the floor to you. What are your favorites? I'll go round robin on this to make it relatively simple to approach. And I'll start with Allison. Boom! Gotcha.
Oh, jeez. So I go from struggling with domain name servers and hosting and this to. Okay, well, this is another struggle because I've pretty much liked all of Miyazaki's films. I would have to say that my favorite would be Princess Mononoke or Nausicaa, Valley of the Wind. So those would be the two.
With Nausicaa, what is it about it that you like? I mean, like, what are the two about each film? What is it that you love about them? Is there like a specific facet of them that stands out for you?
Well, for me, I actually like the fact that there's a significant moral contrast between the main female characters. You have definitely in Princess Mononoke, you have sort of an extreme um, anti-human female character in Princess Mononoke, and she has a fairly you can't necessarily say that her viewpoint is correct. And then you also have the character, the Lady of Irontown, who is very human-centric. Like she's pro-human to the point where she shelters prostitutes and lepers, and she'll take the people that nobody else will. But she's also, in some ways, destroying the forest. So you got this interesting moral contrast between these two characters, and they have these violent altercations. And I like that he's not afraid of actually really damaging his female characters. I know I can hear feminists shrieking about violence against women. I mean, in the course of, for example, Princess Mononoke, I don't know her. I can't remember her name, and I'm not very good at pronouncing names to begin with. But the Lady of Irontown, she ends up losing her arm to the disembodied head of a wolf. It makes sense in context, and I mean, and in Princess Mononoke, the primary female, or sorry, in Nausicaa, Valley of the Wind, the primary female antagonist is also part cyborg because she has, I believe she has sustained injury in battle, but don't quote me on that because it's been a while since I've watched both of these. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why I like it. He's not afraid to create these kinds of moral contrasts between his female characters and really put them at odds, because it's really, I mean, in Princess Mononoke, the peacekeeper is the prince. And again, I forget his name. I'm terrible with names, but the prince is trying to negotiate some kind of accord between these two very much at odds female characters, who are in the midst of battling each other over the question of which should be given priority, the nature or humanity. And it's never, it's not black and white, because you can see the positives in both, and you can see how both are compassionate and moral, but also extremely extreme and violent. So there's a depth to those characters that you just do not see. I dare you to point to not just the depth of the characters of the female antagonist in Princess Mononoke and Princess Mononoke, the depth of characterization, but the depth of the relationship between them, the depth of moral contrast, the juxtaposition of their ideas and their methods. You don't see that in Western media. And I'll throw it back to Brian. There you go.
No, I agree with that. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I thought a Studio Ghibli show would be interesting is that Miyazaki doesn't pull punches when he wants to tell a story, and he just does whatever he feels is necessary. And I think the majority of his films have female protagonists in them. I think I haven't seen them all, but I've noticed that tends to be the case with most of his films. Or they have two main characters and one of each, one male, one female, and they're always young, or most of the time they're children, and that's another thing that we would consider to be a bit scary and taboo, is to put children in potentially dangerous situations, and he doesn't have a problem doing that. And he doesn't tell a good story. So I really do like that. Speaking of the two films that we just brought up, Princess Mononoke and Nausicaa, Valley of the Wind. By the way, the chat's been some people in the chat have been saying it's Mononoke, not Mononoke. So just it's like saying okay.
Yeah, it is
I
Mononoke.
can't pronounce English.
It's
much less
pronounced.
Japanese.
It's pronounced Mononoke.
Yeah, Mononoke. So it doesn't matter. Whatever. We know what you mean. So does anybody want to say anything with specifically regarding Mononoke or Nausicaa?
I do.
Okay.
Damn it.
Well, I'll go first. Out of all of these films, Nausicaa is the only one I really remember somewhat well, and I was really happy with it for the most part, for the animation, for the story, the characterization. There was a part of it I actually didn't like, and I don't think this is really. I think this really just comes down to me as a person, and not necessarily anything that was really wrong with the story, which is actually a good thing. And from what I've seen of the other films, it kind of creates this sense that you don't have to agree with the outcome that the story has, and it can still be good. Most of the time when we see cinema and we see a movie where there was a premise that we didn't like, we tend to have this attitude of, oh, well, it was just a horrible film because I didn't like how it happened. And I was pleasantly surprised that the way that this was designed, that I didn't like how the movie ended or some of the premise that it took, and I still really enjoyed it. My problem with Valley of the Wind, and I'm sure people are going to say that I simply didn't understand the film, and, well, that's between me and my mind, is that it seemed like people in this film, there was definitely a faction that didn't like the plants being in control, but there seemed to be people that were okay being slave to the plant life on this world, that it was almost like a learned helplessness, that they become so dependent on them, the idea of freedom without them seems absurd. It's like asking a fish to stop living in water at that point. And I actually wanted to see the humans who are fighting against the plants to win. I'm sorry if some of my details are off. I haven't seen this for a very long time.
This is actually a fundamental misunderstanding of what's taking place. They're not just regular plants. These are toxic spores. And
I understand.
These are toxic spores, but also what lives in there are a great deal of insects that have attacked the people. So the thing about it is that sorry, I'm getting a lot of echo on whoever's got the thing open. But anyway,
just a sec. I'll try to get that sorted. All right. Yeah, that looks
okay.
like it's.
But the situation with this, the part of the charm of Nausicaa is that she finds herself able to have an understanding, and the whole premise of the movie is that what happened was civilization advanced to a great point where they had these massive super weapons, and they managed to scorch the earth for days.
Chris,
and days.
If you're not speaking, mute.
Yeah. So they managed to scorch the earth. They basically fucked up massively. It fucked up the planet. Planet's fucked, okay? And now they're constantly on the run from these, if these toxic spores, once they take root in certain areas, it can be really, really harmful. It can poison their food supply, it can poison the water supply, and it was totally ruling over everything. But one of the things that was happening they didn't understand is that it was almost like nature was going through the normal avenues to purify the water and purify the land that had just been devastated by all of that advancement, by that warfare, that development of these super weapons in the form of these giant sort of beings that could shoot beams of pure energy. And that was the big thing. But the thing that I liked the most about Nausicaa was that you're in this very alien landscape that doesn't feel as much like, at first, like the same planet anymore. But the thing that immediately you're able to attach yourself to, I mean, right after the beginning credits, which explain so well what has taken place, because it's explaining everything through a series of tapestries of what had happened, the people describing the time before and what happened. And the thing that makes you immediately attach and able to identify with the story is through Nazca, who has, despite this alien landscape, despite everything, is able to connect with the audience on such a human level. There is so much charm about her, this love of nature, this ability to see beauty, even in such toxicity. She's able to find a sense of beauty. She's got this sense of freedom about her, this spirit. And it seems at first like wayward, but she's able to channel that into a leadership position. She's able to channel that energy into something that can help her people. And she uses that. She's very determined in what she does, and she asserts herself. If anybody has ever wondered, how do you manage to create a female character, a strong female character, that is both believable and doesn't pander, this is how you fucking do it. You, it's really a great character, and when she struggles, you struggle. When she is in agony, you are right there with her. This is one of the few films that every time I fucking watch it, cry. Just completely destroyed. But that's just a very short amount of what I would like to say about the film. But if I were to just sit here and talk about it, I would completely dominate the conversation. So I'm gonna pass it to somebody else.
Go ahead, Mad Cat.
I understand all of those elements to it, and it's not such a black and white thing. All I'm doing is really saying what my response was to it. But it is, and that's really what the appeal of this movie is that it was so complex in a lot of the philosophy behind the decisions that the characters made and why they were doing what they were doing. And that's what I think is a good element in these type of films, is it's not like there's only one right path, that it's easy to understand why the various characters take the paths that they do. And my reaction to the film when I saw it many years ago was that I wish that the humans that were fighting against what was on the planet now with the plants and the bugs had won. But even though I really didn't like that, it really still seemed like everything was the status quo, I still really enjoyed the film. That I didn't have to like the ending of the film to really enjoy it, and I think that was a very strong thing that you really don't see in modern cinema today, or if you do, it's very rare. Everything is usually just so black and white, and you're being manipulated to like a character and to follow a character, and if they lose, you feel bad, even if they are wrong. So that was really my ultimate point in all of this, is I think that these kind of films kind of give everyone something to like, no matter what their viewpoint ultimately is.
Well, the thing about that's really Miyazaki 101. In every single film, the moral position is a little bit different than most films. Most films they identify. You very immediately know who is the hero and who is the villain. But in this, the thing about it is that it's never as simple as good and bad. Each person has their own goals. And usually what happens is there are people who are caught in the middle, and those are your protagonists, who are caught in the middle of people who each have their own interests and each have their own ends. Like, for example, the people who were going against the bugs, so to speak, the thing is they were also involved in a larger war against each other. and they came in. What was one of the first things that they did when they came in? They came in and they killed her father. They killed Nazca's father, and then she takes out like about 5 of those fuckers. And that was so awesome. But anyway, she takes out 5 of those guys, if I recall, or a good many of them. And that's how you get the feeling like, okay, these guys are going to be harmful to these people's way of life. But they're also harmful to other people. I mean, they're constantly at war with one another. In fact, war is a constant theme within these movies. It's they're people at war. They each have their own interests, and they can't resolve them. And it's usually that what drives the story. It's not that any one person is correct. It's that they each have their own story and what they want to accomplish. And usually they're misguided in what they're wanting. And like the people who revived that one of those creatures that could shoot those beams of energy, and they were hoping that would give them the military leverage to that they wanted, but it ended up putting everybody else at risk. Yeah.
Oh, well, all right. So, yeah, there's a lot. That's a lot to unpack there as far as those films go. And you're right about the way that Miyazaki frames his stories. I think that in many ways, and this could just be a Western thing mostly. We think of films usually having a protagonist and an antagonist, and it's even when they're a little bit shades of gray, it's usually relatively clear cut. And I've noticed that in a lot of the Miyazaki films I've seen, you think that everything is pretty clear cut, and then as the story moves forward, it becomes much more complicated. And I mean, in most cases, and that's something that I like, and I think it's hard to pull off, but he does it really well. So I tend to see what you're both saying though, and I do understand where that comes from. So let's look at well, let me tell you what my favorite Miyazaki films are, because they're different from the ones that Allison picked, so we can pick these apart as well. For pure beauty and just world building and how creative it was, one of mine is Spirited Away. And oh yeah, well we can certainly expand on that. And I liked Spirited Away because I thought it was really, well, first of all, it's gorgeous, of course, and there was a lot of great character designs, and I also have a very large interest in things like mythology, and most of the time, or mythology and other cultures, sort of versions of things like the spirit world and their sort of myths and stuff, and I think that's super cool. And the fact that I got to see that in from Miyazaki's perspective in Spirited Away with all those great characters was really cool, and it's really well animated. Plus, it also has a really great story where you have this girl who is relatively pampered, and she's sheltered by her parents, and she's a bit spoiled and moody, and then she goes into this world without her parents to help her, and she has to fend for herself. And she gets a lot of, she gets direct criticism from the spirits in the spirit world. And as the film goes on, she becomes firstly dependent on anyone that she thinks could give her some shelter from all the chaos that's going on. But then as the film goes on, she starts to not only stand for herself to the degree that an 8-year-old, which I can only guess that's her age, to the degree that she can, but then she even starts to make sacrifices and take initiative to protect the people that she cares about and to free her parents, and she makes sacrifice and all of that. And that's one what I really admired about that film, Spirited Away. So if any, I have another one that I'm going to bring up, which is my all-time favorite, but we can come back around and do that one. So, what are other people's thoughts on? Does anybody have any thoughts on Spirited Away?
Yep.
Okay, I figured Rachel would have thoughts on that. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, the whole theme of it is actually, I'm trying to remember whether it's Shintoism or Buddhism, but it's this idea. The whole main theme of it is this whole idea of purity. It's sort of basically throughout the story, through her suffering, she is being purified and being forged into a better person through hardship. That is one of the central things. I think some people have theorized also that to some extent it was a commentary on prostitution in somewhere in there, but I can't remember what they had particularly said. But basically, I think around the time period there was also a great deal of young girls who are getting involved in prostitution and stuff like that, but I don't know how much weight that really has. But the thing about it is that you do have this character who is suddenly thrust into the situation. That's also another common thing that you see throughout Miyazaki films, where the character is very much dependent on others, and then is put into the situation for the first time where they have to fend for themselves and prove themselves, and in doing so, they end up becoming changed by the end. But that's a very interesting thing, and I do adore all of the different bits of mythology that they managed to shove in there, which is really fun.
Yeah, Spirited Away is actually probably my absolute favorite Miyazaki film, though that's not saying too much since I'm kind of behind on my Miyazaki quota, especially anything before 2000 as much. But from the movies I have seen, like, and Spirited Away is a really good example of that, as well as Howl's Moving Castle. So this will be kind of a devil's advocate time. But it seems like it's a very much a girl saves boy kind of situation. In both of those sets, you have both of those movies. You have a young girl in one sense, so like the innocence personified of femaleness that way, and then in the Howls you have basically a woman that it has the mores of a grandma in a certain way, but she's sweet and nice and has those positive feminine qualities. So I will say that Miyazaki does have. He doesn't have like overly strong female characters in that sense, that they are vulnerable, they are interesting, they are all those other attributes you can write about women instead of just strong. But still, a lot of the basis of the movies that I've seen anyway has the pure female character saving the troubled or otherwise cursed male character, and so that is something that I would consider kind of iffy about Miyazaki films, but. That was just going to be my only point about all that, is that it does seem to have that trope of the female saving the male through innocence and purity.
Yeah, I can see that too. We were just talking about earlier how Miyazaki films most often have female leads, but I don't, I personally never had a problem with the idea of that at all, as long as the characters don't bore me, as long as they're good characters, and they are usually good characters. I mean, do they maybe because they're children, because most of the time they're children, there might be like an innocence thing or a purity thing that he's pushing through, but it could be more so because they're kids rather than because they're girls. Because there's another one, it's not my favorite, I found it to be a little bit on the boring side, but it was called Ponyo, and it had a male lead character in it, and he was the same thing. Like, he was super innocent and and all that, and he had to save the girl, I think, in that. But I don't remember because I honestly couldn't focus on Ponyo that much. I didn't think it was their best work. Did you guys know, by the way, before I'm gonna give the floor up to Mad Cat. Did you guys know that in most of Miyazaki's films, that they start making it before they even know, they don't work with a script, and that Miyazaki is kind of making things up as he goes along? That's something that I found out yesterday while I was doing some research. Not in all cases, but in many of them. And this might relate to something that Rachel was saying in the chat before we started talking, where Nazca, they wouldn't allow that to be animated unless there was a manga first. So Miyazaki made a manga real quick so that they can get on with making the animated film. So,
Yeah, it was an uphill battle if you start learning about how all of this started, and just the labor and everything that it took to get all of this together is a story in itself. But yeah, go on.
so I'll give it to Mad Cat and then Allison.
Well, I wanted to comment on what you were saying about, well, what Anna was talking about, and then what you touched up on female characters tend to be saving males through some issue of purity. And I don't know necessarily if that's an agenda he's trying to push so much as it might be a cultural thing. And in many cultures, women, especially little girls, are a symbol of purity. And his films seem to take on a lot of his culture, and I don't know what his specific culture is, so I'm not going to try to say. I'm going to guess Japanese, but I could be wrong. But I think it's more that he's trying to touch on traditional values of his cultures rather than try to say, well, only girls can do good. And I just had another point I wanted to make about this. But let me finish real quick. It's like if I were to write a story, I would use my own traditions on that. And it wouldn't necessarily be a political statement I was trying to make. I mean, I could turn it into a political statement. I'm sure a lot of feminists have tried to turn it into that. But when I see his story work, I don't see any sort of politics behind it. And yeah, I kind of hate the fact that it always seems like the women are the smartest and the wisest and the most innocent, and they're the ones that have to save everyone. But when I see these films, I don't feel like I'm being preached at. I think it's just, this is the culture, this is the traditions that these cultures have, and that's the story that they're starting from.
Actually, I want to speak to that, and I also want to speak to what Anna said. I won't get into Howl's Moving Castle, partially because Howl's Moving Castle was based on a Western book, so you might see those themes a bit more strongly in that one. But I'll go into Spirited Away and the idea that it was her innocence that saved the main male character. I don't think it was. I think it was the toughness that she developed that helped to save him. And also, I mean, her willingness to endure that kind of adversity. She got the medicine from the river spirit by being the one who endured the stink and the pollution of the river spirit to actually find the purity within it. So and it was not an easy task, as you can see from that scene. She had to really use a lot of endurance and muscle to actually get that task done and receive the medicine that she ended up using to, in turn, purify the dragon spirit, the other water spirit. Just let me finish up. Or did you have something?
Well, I was gonna say, could I speak to that? I didn't mean to say it. Could I speak in the middle? Sorry.
Oh yeah, no, go ahead.
Go on. Go ahead. Sorry.
But so she wasn't her innocence that purified her. It was her ability to endure an unpleasant situation and focus on her goal, and then she was rewarded with the medicine that also purified the dragon spirit. So I'm not sure if it's not really the same trope as the pure maiden saving the bad boy from
that was a little more of the Howl's Moving Castle, but it is just and I would like to be clear, I do not have any problem with the female characters in Miyazaki because they're not like the typical characters. So just to throw that out there, but
but I agree with that. Also, what Mad Cat was saying, I don't see a lot of that same. The shows that I've seen of Miyazaki, I'm not even going to get into Ponyo because it's beautiful and it's also bland and incomprehensible. But Maybe we should ask which Miyazaki film you think
actually,
is the worst. But
I was gonna speak on the difference.
no,
between...
just let me finish. Just let me finish on what Mad Cat's point was. I don't see a lot of the same kind of uber femme tropes in Miyazaki as I do in Western media. Miyazaki seems to be capable of allowing his female heroes to be very, very wrong and very forceful in how they're wrong. At the same time as you can sort of understand their perspective, they're just really aggressive about being wrong sometimes. And they're not the wisest. In fact, in Princess Mononoke, Prince Ashitaka was the peacekeeper and was the wisest of all the characters. And he was sort of the heart of the film. And it was falling in love with him that made Princess Mononoke become more able to see the situation from another point of view besides herself. She was very myopic in how she was looking at the world. And it was Prince Ashitaki's influence and his purity, which was interesting because his story was brought into play by becoming impure from the spirit of rage. But his fight against that, he himself, aside from being tainted by the spirit of rage, he himself was able to maintain his own mind. So it speaks to that inner strength and even that balance or wisdom. And he was really the heart, not just the heart of the film, but the wisest character. And unless anybody wants to disagree with me, but so Miyazaki has that balance, I think.
I wanted to.
Go ahead, Rachel.
I wanted to speak to the difference between things like the idea of Shinto purity and the difference, and Western sort of religious purity. There's a very big difference between the two. Whereas we have a tendency to associate things like virginity and stuff with purity. We're talking about spiritual purity here. When I say that Spirited Away is about spiritual purity, what we actually see is that the reason that you had her parents and Chihiro coming into these problems is because they were fundamentally impure. Spiritually, they were impure, basically. And it is this idea of purifying yourself through action and also purification through water. That's a big theme throughout Shintoism, is this idea of cleansing the self, spiritual purity through water. And if you look at the idea of the situation when you had the stink spirit, and really he turned out to be a river god, that whole situation was sort of a purification through water. That's it's a fundamental difference that you have here. This idea of a spiritual purity throughout Miyazaki films. But yeah, just wanted to touch on that.
Oh well, no, thanks for that. Does anybody else have any comments about Spirited Away? Okay, so I love Spirited Away. So. Rachel, what's another one of your favorites?
Oh my God! Oh, this is a really great one. But here's the thing about Miyazaki films is it's kind of like picking your favorite child. I mean, I have Nausicaä being my favorite, but I also have other favorites. But if I had to give myself a close second, Kiki's Delivery Service is a very important film, and I will explain why. The very idea is you have sort of this very reckless girl who very much wants to be on her own, but she has her own rude awakening upon finally having to fend for herself for a year being a witch in training. She finds that she hits rock bottom, and it's incredibly depressing, and she has this feeling of complete helplessness and that she doesn't know what she's going to do because she's relied so much on her powers. And a lot of people actually had problems with this, especially the writer of the original book, because that didn't actually happen in the original source material. And so she was very upset about it. But I think that was a very important turn in the book. In the movie. That was a very important part, because in doing that, her support system, everything that she had leaned on before, wasn't there, and she had to learn to just be okay with herself. And that was really the lesson, is that about living on your own, about forging something for yourself. Creating things where it comes from. That sense of you can only be responsible for your own happiness. You can only be responsible for yourself. It's a story about self-reliance. But,
yeah, I'm sensing a pattern here with these Miyazaki films, sort of, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, I haven't seen Kiki's Delivery Service in a really long time, but I think that it is really good for those reasons, and the idea of a person of her age with her sort of fortitude to be able to do all that stuff on her own, like basically, as a girl that young, I think that that is just a really cool thing that you don't see that often in film in general, much less animation. So, Anna, you had a question?
No, that was something else entirely. But I will just comment, because why not? There is interesting that Ghibli, as soon as we started watching some more movies to prepare for this, the Nerdcast a little more. As soon as the movie started rolling, I was like, oh. Yeah, Miyazaki film. Yeah, there's just a certain like Disney almost. There's this look and colors and maybe even sounds. I'm not sure, like a whole packaged deal that Miyazaki comes with, not just ideologically, as we were just discussing, not just certain ideas. And I do really appreciate that he has working through adversity. As for women specifically, as a huge part of films that I watched anyway. And that it doesn't have just things falling from the sky and landing on their perfect, dainty little shoulders like you'd have in some of the Western and most recently sci-fi. But they actually have to work to get things, which is a lot more realistic and prepares women for the real world a little better. But of course, it's fantasy. Why are we talking about the real world? Either way, it's just more complex, interesting characters than female characters than in Western media. But there's also visually a Miyazaki sense about it also. I just find that very interesting, and I see why they're called Studio Ghibli. Like, it's definitely a force in and of itself.
Yeah, I was just talking more broadly about Studio Ghibli's films and Miyazaki. You guys, well, for those of you who follow anime, you might know this. I know I learned this, that Miyazaki was actually interviewed not very long ago and was critical of the anime and manga industry, basically saying that the problem with anime these days is that it's basically occupied by otakus. And I guess what he's really ultimately saying is that people were more interested in the fandom of anime rather than the craft. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is when I watched my two favorite films, which are Spirited Away and my other one, which is Grave of the Fireflies, which I want to talk about later. And I was paying very close attention to how he animates everything. And one of the things that makes Studio Ghibli specifically stand apart from everyone else, or at least most people in the industry, is how he animates from life. Like, he observes the way that, not only the way that things move, like insects and animals and the people and children, but he also looks at clothing and he looks at mannerisms and behavior. So when you see someone, that they could just be standing there, they might have an itch and they'll scratch it. And if it's a child, they'll do it in a specific way. And he gets the body language, very, very much down. I mean, when I say him, I guess I mean a collective way, because it's like a team. And that is something that I highly admire. There's a lot of that even in things that are not of this world, like you see in Spirited Away or My Neighbor Totoro with the cat bus. It acts like a cat, even though it's like a bus, with lots of legs and stuff. And he does that in a lot of his work, and I really that's something that I think that he speaks to when he's making those criticisms of the industry as a whole. Oh, Rachel?
Well, I wanted to speak to the commentary about it being the choice of female protagonists, and I think it's very important because it reminds me of one of his quotes. And the thing is, like, since I can't quote it verbatim, I think it really speaks to his philosophy on gender specifically. And the reason why he's chosen females is, he says that one thing specifically about men and women, I think it really sums it up. He basically said something along the lines of, well, when you see a guy firing a gun, that is business as usual. But when you see women using firearms or something like along those lines, you know that something fundamentally has happened to the society that has, that has forced women into those situations. So it's sort of giving you an idea of the sign of the times that that women have no longer can just sit idly by anymore in that society because things have pretty much gone to hell. That's sort of his perspective on it, is that when the world has gone to hell, everybody has to pick up arms. Everybody has to be capable and have to be handling these things. That it can no longer just be. We can't rely on traditionalism when things have gone to hell. So that's sort of giving a perspective into what is happening in the culture of the time. I mean, you even look at something like Howl's Moving Castle, and you see Sophie still has a very much. She's still very female, even though she doesn't. Even though she's forced to handle certain things, it's done in a very sort of stereotypical female fashion. She's very much not Princess Mononoke or Nausicaä. You have Sophie is dealing with things in a very female way. Even though war has come along, she is not the person who is handling things through force. She never once hits anybody throughout that entire film.
Can I point something out? What's interesting about that framing is it also points to traditionalism being, or at least the conception of traditionalism in which the man is the sole provider and protector, as being actually a very expensive luxury of a wealthy elite. Whether or not you want to call the wealthy elite the upper class or even just the entire Western nations, the idea that a woman just sits at home and doesn't do work is an indulgence. It's something that we throughout most of society we couldn't afford until Industrial Revolution created these vast leisure classes, and it isn't a situation like it's prior to the Industrial Revolution taking over most of the tasks at the home. If you look at just washing clothes. That used to be something that would take something like 12 hours a week or 18 hours a week just to properly wash and sanitize clothing. And it was a heavy labor kind of job. And Industrial Revolution gave the washer to women, which liberated a lot of their time. And you can say that about modern stoves and all the other modern conveniences of the home have essentially taken a job that was very laborious and essential to the running of the home and the health of the family, and also essential to the survival of the community, and turned it into a leisure class lifestyle of being pampered and served. And it is a very costly position. Most societies cannot afford it in the slightest. So ultimately, that's an interesting point that you make, Rachel, is that when the chips are down, women have to actually assume a more so-called masculine role. And really, what does that say about the masculine role? It sounds like it's more like the masculine role is better termed the servant role. Because if women have to take it on when we no longer have the ability to afford their leisure, then it's not really masculine. It's just that women's role, the so-called feminine role, is the role of leisure and pampered and being benefited. And it's the role of the upper classes, really. I'll throw that out there.
It's funny that you bring that up because the one thing that a lot of times boys and men are attracted to is the idea of heroism, and the word hero is I think it's descended from the word "siro," which means to serve, which is basically like to be a servant, or like
Boy originally meant servant.
yeah, "siro" meant servant, right? It was like a Greek thing, right?
I don't know about hero. I haven't really studied the history of that, but I do know boy originally meant servant.
Oh,
And
the
then,
word boy itself, yeah.
yeah, the word boy itself meant servant. Hero also meant servant, like you were saying. And there used to be an actual term for adult male human that was separate from the term for just adult, gender-neutral adult, which is the word man actually literally means just gender-neutral adult. It's completely without. It originally had, well, it had a slight male connotation, or it started to take that on, but originally was gender-neutral. It didn't have a gender, man. That's why they believed it was okay to use it to refer to all humans, because it didn't have in and of itself a gender. In order to gender the word man, you needed to use the word were. So adult human male was a wereman. Adult human female was a whiffman. So it's interesting how that not only has our terminology changed to remove a unique identity from men, the identity of man really isn't about being an adult male. It's about service to others. So it's not. It's like what we conceive of as the masculine identity has nothing to do with being masculine. It just has everything to do with being, dare I say it, a service class, a utility class.
Interesting bit of trivia. Does anyone know the Slavic word for slave?
No.
Robot. You know
Robot.
why robot is the Slavic word for slave? Because everyone else's word is Slav, as in slave.
Robot.
Tesla was a Slav. God bless you, Tesla. God bless you all for inventing a new kind of slave. It's just taken us more than a century to, cross it over.
I think I understand what you're getting at. It's maybe. I think I'm reaching the horizon of what you're getting at, Mike. It's sometimes your logic
Yeah.
is even more deep, and like you managed to go underneath me, which I salute you, sir.
My persona is a deep undersea trench where we have no idea if there is a bottom or if it just keeps on going through the Earth's crust. Yes.
I know I have a small organ, but I didn't think I'd be playing in a cathedral. Hey-o. So,
Okay, sorry, I think we went way off topic.
no, I know. I'm reeling it back.
I know. We're reeling it back, and speaking of fish.
Yeah, I'm reeling it back in. Speaking of fish, one more thing I wanted to say about Spirited Away that I forgot to mention, and then I'm gonna ask Hannah or Anna what her favorites are, but or one of her favorites. The girl, I can't remember her name because they call her Sin. Sin was her spirit name that she was given. One of the things that I thought was also really great, and this is something that happens in some fairy tales, which I think was clearly what Miyazaki was going for with Spirited Away. She makes a sacrifice that I really admire too. So it's Sen, that's right. She makes a sacrifice that I really admire too, where she's got the cure that could help her parents, but she uses it on No Face, and that's to save everyone else. And that could have just solved her problems if she chose to be selfish. And earlier in the film, when she was a more self-interested, selfish character, she probably would have done that. But she had changed by this time, and her character had developed. And then she took it a step further and went to see the twin sister of the old witch to strike a deal to make things right, which was, I think, that was really cool and admirable. And I always like seeing that kind of stuff.
I don't know. I almost feel like she was from the beginning like that a little bit. But, I mean, I guess she was kind of selfish in, like, the car ride with her parents. But then it feels like as soon as she got into this weird magical world that she started, like, helping out the suit guys and I don't know, just kind of being nice to people.
She was, but then there was like throughout the film there was this whole like she was looking for the other guy, the guy who sort of helped her out when she first arrived there, and she was asking about him constantly, and they were like, "Why are you concerned? He's somewhere else. He's not here right now." And after a while, she stopped doing that, and then she sort of started fending for herself. I think that I mean her development was a little bit on the fast. Yeah, Haku. Thank you, Rachel. I don't remember these names. I swear. The character development was probably expedited in the interest of the film being like 2 hours long, but I could still sort of parse through it and see that. But I see what you're saying. I mean, she was generally like a pleasant, if not fragile, character from the beginning. But she kind of toughens up. So Anna, what's one of your favorites and why of the Ghibli films?
Well, I really, really, really like Spirited Away, but that's probably because it was my first. It was my first one of Miyazaki's, and then and I know we've said things about Mononoke in general in like private chat in the past, but it's something that there's something about it that I kind of sat weird with me when I first watched it, but conceptually wise and storyline maybe I think that was probably the problem because it was too everything that I like. It was too much. I was like, no, something has to be wrong with it. You have to be compensating or for something or pandering to the whole eco-terrorist, practically like pro-nature, anti-disruption of harmony, just everything that I fucking love about Eastern culture, and that it had in Mononoke. And so I kind of had a bristled reaction to it at first, but I would probably have to say that conceptually and ideologically, Mononoke would be my favorite. But then again, I haven't seen all of them. I'll still throw that out there. I'm not done with all the Ghibli movies, so maybe one day I'll come out on my Twitter and say, I recant everything I said on HBR. These other ones are my favorites. But ideologically, it's Mononoke, and then, of course, Spirited Away is it's like a trip down Fields Lane, definitely.
Okay. Allison?
Okay. Yeah, I just had a really brief point, and it's actually completely and utterly off topic, so it's got to be brief. Do you find it interesting that man used to be the gender-neutral term for adult, and girl used to be the gender-neutral term for child? So essentially, what we have now is women appropriated the gender-neutral term for child, and men appropriated the gender-neutral term for adult. I think that says something.
Appropriation.
Well, no, it's like women are children, men are adults.
That's crazy. Not only adults, but agents of destruction and death.
That's the thing. It's like, well, because they have the adult power, right? It's written into our subconscious, but I'm not saying that women necessarily are children. I'm saying that that's how we see them. And I'll step out of the stage.
That's how our language has been corrupted, so to speak. We're still trying to defrag it, folks.
Etched into our DNA with the hard calluses of Keith Richards.
Well, some of us are trying to.
Part of that is just our language. Personally, I mean, it's not.
Yeah, but our
language. It's not that way in every language, though.
Yeah, but our language reflects our mentality. What we decided that we didn't need anymore, and what we decided was better termed this or better termed that. Getting rid of that unique identity for men reflects some attitude that we had socially. Making girl only refer to girl children and boy servant, originally servant, referred to boys, that reflects an attitude. So it all reflects social pressures that we had. So I think language does matter.
And it's not just in the Germanic languages, by the way. Like garçon is also the French word for servant. And homme is also the French word for man, which just means same. They didn't go with andro from the Greek for man. They did the same thing we did. They just went with a general term like man. Happened across the European board, it would seem.
Yeah, but also I read from the chat that maiden used to refer to a virgin of either sex, so we decided that only women could be virgins, I guess, because, if you give male sexuality, untouched male sexuality, its own name, you might actually consider it valuable in some sense.
And
But
calling a guy a maiden over Xbox Live chat's not as insulting.
I guess.
Virgin.
Yeah, I guess you're right. But I wanted to say something to what Brian said about defracking the language, or maybe it was Mike that said we're defracking. Well, I guess some of us are defracking these concepts, the concept of associating women with children and men with adults. Others of us are simply overlaying the same goddamn concept over top and lying about being progressive. But anyway, go ahead. Good. I'm on my soapbox.
Here's a fun one if you really want to wrap your mind around it. There is no actual word for virgin in ancient Egyptian. It's like a completely alien concept. Everybody was fucking. There's just no concept of purity attached to sexuality.
Well, I made this point once ages ago. It's sort of arbitrary that we have a word for someone who hasn't had sex, but we don't have a word for someone who has. What's a word for someone who has had sex at least once? There isn't a term for it. We label the people who haven't, but we don't label the people who have. Why do we do it that way around? There's no particular reason.
That might have. Well, I don't know. I was gonna say that might have religious roots, but we'd have to dig into that because we're looking at.
Just to address one point in the chat, it was from Recusant. Yeah, we value the aspects of youth in women and the aspects of maturity in men. Simple as that. That's fine. Actually, no. If you're going to give women the kind of social, legal, and political powers over men that our society has seen fit to give them, we sort of have to value maturity in women, or we end up with a society like our own, in which, it's not really fun. We're having problems, as you might say. Anyway, go on. Am I the only one talking now? Like, I don't hear anyone else.
Unless someone else is trying to... I think they're all fighting with the mute button or something.
Oh my god, they're all fighting with the mute button, so I guess you're stuck with me for a while. Me and Mike, but Mike is really quiet.
Everyone disappeared.
Yeah, it's like, I think maybe Brian got booted? But he's still there. I can still see his beady black eyes staring. And before I mention anything, my eyes are also beady and black. So we're the honey badger twins at the moment. Yeah. So a whole bunch of beady black eyes staring at each other, waiting for which one's going to try to eat the other first, I guess. All right. Well, I wanted to talk about which is your least favorite Miyazaki film. Now that the force of good has been silenced, possibly for the rest of the show, now that Brian's no longer, I don't know,
infecting the atmosphere with his cheerfulness.
Yeah, no longer cock blocking my miasma of evil. Let's go dark and
brooding,
mean, and like YouTube hate mean. So which comments do you hate? Holy. Yeah. Let's go full YouTube comments mean, like full to YouTube hate on. All right, which Miyazaki film do you guys hate the most? Because I would have to say mine is Ponyo. I fucking can't stand it. It's just
can't wait to see it.
Makes me want to strangle some of the characters. Like there isn't even a character. Starting with the mother, she's so irresponsible and annoying and sort of emotionally incestuous towards her son. It's like, yeah, way to put a lot of weight on that poor kid's shoulders, that he's responsible for your emotional landscape, lady. Anyway, but all of the characters I can't stand.
Isn't that true for a lot of single mothers with boy children, though?
Yeah, but she's not a single mother. She does have a husband who apparently has to constantly make her feel better about her bullshit. Like, you married a guy who works on a boat, lady. Guess
what he does?
On the boat. That's what he does.
For a long time.
He's going to be on the boat for a long time. And so he's supporting your ass, I assume. So maybe you could be more emotionally supportive or something.
Oh, it's I'm not even going to say that. Tropes in television about the wife that is living off of the labor and slave labor of her husband in the big house, and then bitching, why don't I ever spend any time with you? Well, because he's always working to give you all the shit.
Yeah, we're going YouTube mean now. And like the Ponyo's incomprehensible. It's not. I don't find it very well paced. I mean, it's beautiful, and I don't know where Miyazaki is going with these increasingly younger protagonists. I'm starting to lose them after like Spirited Away, because seriously, Spirited Away. Okay, she's 8, she's 10. There's something there that you can sort of relate to because she bucks up and she does stuff. But now the female protagonists are moving into like 2 or 3 years old. It's like, what? I don't want to watch.
That's not
Sorry?
really true. That's actually incorrect. The characters in My Neighbor Totoro were also young. You had May, who was probably about 5 years old, and that was early on in his career. It wasn't meant to be something that is increasingly going younger and younger. The final movie actually had older protagonists, his final film. So.
Well, it's interesting too that they do have that though. I think that's probably very intentional, or was back in the day on his part, to as a avatar or archetype of innocence, purity, goodness, whatever the fuck. But it's interesting though. In speaking of bad movies, I mean, Howl's wasn't bad because I haven't seen Ponyo. It probably is worse, but there was that element of strange pacing and underdeveloped characters, and then Markle was also like 4 or 5, super adorable. He wasn't a main character, but yeah, definitely Miyazaki has a penchant for taking inanimate objects too, and then turning them all cute like. But I will say Howl's was definitely, of the ones that I've seen, my least favorite due to strange. Is just so many holes in like character development, but then too much character development in other ways, and yeah, very pretty and neat, but like what?
Yeah, I'll just say
anticlimactic.
one thing.
Mhm.
The only reason that I like Howl's Moving Castle better than Ponyo is because the female protagonist, is actually not a child. I don't know where. Okay, fair enough. He had younger protagonists earlier, but he seems to be going younger and younger and younger. And I don't know what next one is going to be. A fetus, a sperm, like it's.
It's like 5. I mean, I don't see it as going progressively younger and younger, to be perfectly honest. I mean, what?
No,
I mean,
Ponyo's a toddler. I mean, the boy is 5, but she's like a toddler.
they're both about the same age.
No, they're not.
I'd watch a Miyazaki film about a sperm, guys. I'm just
You'd
saying.
watch him. Okay, all right.
We all
At
would.
that point, it's the U. It's the U curve, right?
It's
At
us.
some point, it becomes interesting again. No, like
Looks like he's making them because we just keep watching them.
If you make the main character a sperm and he's got like a little face and he's like traveling from like the tip of the penis through to the egg, and along the way there's an adventure and there's all these like things that he's running into, and all of his friends are dying off like in some World War II storming the beach kind of raid, and they're all like dying around him because they're not making it there in time, and you like get to know these sperms as they travel to the egg and they get there, and then that's when they realize that only one of them is going to survive, and they have to come to that realization.
And it'll be adorable
It's like
and
a friendship
educational.
the whole way, like
and tragic.
I will actually.
dark.
I will
watch
admit.
Miyazaki.
I will admit that. That Ponyo was basically the Little Mermaid on acid. I'm not gonna really throw Howl's Moving Castle under the bus. I really do feel it absolutely had redeemable qualities.
Well, no, just of the ones that I watched specifically, not overall, certainly. Because there's all these like '97 movies that like back when maybe he was first starting out. So who knows? Sometimes it's like the opposite thing of other artists, that they start out really well and then end up shitty, or others start out like really shitty and then just find their legs in like the last dawning years of their career. So.
I didn't get to watch Arrietty, so I really don't have an opinion on it. I can't really give one. Same thing with Grave of the Fireflies, but I hear that it was heart-wrenchingly, like, just emotionally destructive to anybody who watches it. Like, just, it's gonna fuck you up. It's like, grab your tissues and prepare your anus, because you're
I've
about
only
to go on
watched
a
that
ride.
movie once.
For the tear train. Prepare your anus for the tear train.
Exactly. Just don't even think about going anywhere after you're watching this film. It's gonna fuck
Because
you
your
up.
anus will be raw from tears.
Only here could that connection be made.
No, just prepare
It's just me,
yourselves.
guys.
'Cause
It's all me. I'll
I mean,
take all.
I have to prepare myself for like the end of some Miyazaki films because it's like a oh god,
They
Oh, at
care
the
about your
end,
anus, is what
yeah.
you're saying.
it's like
They
a
care, yeah.
over emotional emotional overflow of like oh god,
Oh,
shit.
the phrasing is
I,
killing
I
me.
was I was keeping myself together before this point, but like I can't even. Maybe
Try to
okay.
contain yourself. It's okay.
Too much phrasing.
That's what you say. You say to
Such
yourself.
such phrasing.
I tell myself each time, like I'm not that I watch the end of Nazca, I'm not gonna cry. I am not. Oh fuck, I'm crying. Shit.
Yeah, no, I get that. That's why my favorite Miyazaki film is Grave of the Fireflies. If that movie doesn't make you cry by the time it's over, you don't have a soul.
We're actually talking about our least favorite.
No, I
Okay.
know, but I mean, I already.
Get
That's
with the program, Brian.
I would say least favorite would definitely go into would probably be Ponyo, but it's kind of like I don't really hate it. It was just really bizarre. It was really bizarre, and I was like, oh, what were you thinking? You just did this because you wanted to do shit. You wanted to do specific things, and you're like, uh.
he may have just been on like a schedule to get shit done. I also think that one of the things that Ghibli does that I also find that a lot of other studios don't do as well is they aim for different audiences and they hit the target most of the time. And I think that Ponyo was for people that are just a lot younger. Like my niece and
Yeah.
nephew, who are very young, they loved it. And I tried to watch it with them, and I just was like fucking bored out of my mind, you know. And I was like, oh, I mean, it is very well animated, and you're always gonna get that. But I'm like, I don't care about this little girl and her little, pudding face, and like this little boy and his bad haircut that much.
And her
But-
love of ham.
but- what?
And her love of ham. She's like, oh my
Yes.
god, you're putting ham in it. Put more ham in.
Yeah, and that was like, but my niece and nephew, they loved it.
Oh god.
But if I told them, hey, we're gonna sit down and watch Grave of the Fireflies, I wouldn't do that to them because they'd have to watch some poor girl die slowly over the course of the film. From like, I don't know, and while like, Japan is getting bombed back to the Stone Age by the Americans, and there's political, talk going throughout and stuff. And
I can't help but think of that every time. And now I look at any kind of Japanese like game, like Final Fantasy VII, playing that right now, or any other thing in anime where you have all these giant bridges that are blown up and with big holes in them, and buildings come crashing down with like Godzilla and things like that. Nowadays I can't help but always think like, oh shit, we bombed the fuck out of them. That's in their cultural history as like a big, painful, horrible wound because that fucking happened to these people for no reason.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, and this is a really terrible thing to say, but it's almost like they wouldn't have anime if we didn't blow them the fuck up, and now we're grateful for that. And I mean, I say that I'm not laughing because I think that's great. I think it's one of those. It's funny what people's what they endure in as far as like a people can endure in terms of their hardship and how it shapes their future after that. And so like they go from, because like before they didn't really do, I mean it's like almost like after the bombing and they surrendered, all of their storytelling became, a lot of the storytelling rather, it revolved around the events of World War II. And a lot of the stuff like Godzilla is an example of, it's like the inspiration of like nuclear destruction personified in a creature. Like there wouldn't be a Godzilla if they didn't get bombed. And it's crazy how that works out. But in a lot of their stories, like Akira, for example, starts with the destruction of an entire city. It's almost like that's how it opens up. And they do that, and so it became a recurring theme.
And then Evangelion, which is just Akira Jr.
Yeah, what was it?
Do you think in the future we'll look back on this period of film as post 9/11 Western movies? Because maybe that's shaped our sort of.
Oh yeah.
Well, it definitely
culture.
shaped policy.
know-
Same way the bombs shaped Japanese culture.
You know,
know.
there's a very interesting concept that it happens in Japanese culture. It's this sense of being constantly contemplative of both life and death, and also finding a bit of beauty in things gradually fading away.
You talking about the cherry blossoms philosophy or the?
No, well, no, it's not just cherry blossoms. It's in everything. I mean, there's this love of things slowly but surely becoming getting wear and tear. It's a philosophy that pervades throughout design and things like that. It's this idea of things becoming more beautiful for having gained wear and tear.
Oh, you're talking about the mending with gold practice?
Well, no, it's
Or,
not. No, it's not just that. I'm saying this is a philosophy that is throughout the aesthetics. Basically, this is not just for one or two things. It goes into things like Japanese woodworking and stuff like that. It's a different kind of mentality of things having been more beautiful for having flaws and gaining wear and tear and things like that.
I wanted to reply.
There's Karen in the chat. I just saw Karen in the chat.
Yeah, she said wabi sabi.
Yes, wabi sabi. There we go.
I wanted to comment on someone in the chat that said that anime came about because the Japanese really admired Disney cartoons.
Yes.
And I know. Well, that's that is true, and that was where their sort of visual style started when Osamu Tezuka took an interest in like early Disney cartoons and Betty Boop and stuff like that, and that's how you can see like the connection. But I do think that their anime may have existed, whether or not there was a World War II. But I think it would be in terms of the types of stories they told, they would have been very different if World War II hadn't turned out the way it did. And I think that was mainly my point, because I don't want to get off without understanding that, yes, I do know that Disney was actually the inspiration for anime, and then anime sort of took a life on of its own after that. So,
Yeah,
and
I wish Vietnam recovered better after,
because I mean, I don't think there would be, like I said, I don't think there'd be a Godzilla or an Akira or so many of the other post-apocalyptic storylines like Fist of the North Star. They probably wouldn't have existed if the Japanese hadn't at first hand experienced,
those visuals.
the nuclear war. Yeah, Barefoot Gen is another one of my favorite all-time animes, and it's about the bombings, and then so is Grave of the Fireflies, which I was just going to comment on. And one of the things that I think that's great about it is they speak about these things, but they do it in a very like almost apolitically, where it may be related to a historical event, but it's not preachy. It's just sort of sending a general message, which I really like, because I think it's not easy to do that without getting preachy and propagandist. And I think in most of the time, the Japanese manage to avoid doing that with a lot of their anime, in particular Miyazaki. And that's one of the things that, because Mad Cat was mentioning how he never felt that he was being preached at. And I think that one of the ways you do it is if you do speak about something political, you can do it, but you want to do it in such a way that it makes people feel included in the conversation and not being talked down to. And that's one of the ways that he does it really well with Grave of the Fireflies, because it becomes more about a story about a boy and a girl, and it's a really good one. If you haven't seen that, prepare your anus, as Rachel says, but it's really good. That's my favorite.
Because your anus is where your tears come from?
Yes, that's where your tears come from.
Very much so.
Am I the only one that has this experience?
Yeah, I haven't.
No, you're not alone.
I don't know about the anus being where your tears come from, but I haven't seen that movie yet because I have an aversion sometimes to like I have to go through a ritual preparing myself.
Oh,
to
Rachel,
watch something
if you think Nausicaa makes you cry, you're not ready.
I know. I just like
Grave of the Fireflies.
My butthole is not ready.
No,
I don't know.
Your body's not ready. Grave of the Fireflies was the first animated film that Roger Ebert saw, and in his review said, we need to rethink how we look at animated film. Like, it changed his mind about because
yeah.
before that he assumed if it was animated, it was for children.
Well, actually,
And-
I have seen something that will destroy you completely, and it's actually a Korean animated film. And go see this, because you're gonna say, Rachel, there's no way that I'm going to be reduced to this this big bundled mess of tears. Leafy, I think it's A Hen into the Wild. I believe it's Korean, and it's a story about a chicken. I'm not going to give away too much, but it's a story about a chicken who decides that she's going to leave the farm, and she ends up raising a duckling, and it gets too fucking real. It gets way too fucking real because there's all this conflict and stuff about her not being able to be like a duck mother, so she can't do all the same things that her child can, and he resents her and all kinds of stuff. It gets really fucked up. But it's you get to this state of acceptance of what's about to happen towards the end, and it's just, I mean, it fucked with people so much they changed the end in the West. So you can't actually get a copy. You cannot actually pick up a copy that has the original ending, I think, in the U.S. or in parts of the UK, because they simply could not handle it. I think they did a test audience, and it just fucked up the kids so bad they just couldn't keep the original end. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that sounds really fucked up. I'll have to look it up.
Yeah.
I'm going to subject myself to it.
And watch it, if only for the fact that they managed to have a Bishonen duck. A Bishonen mallard. I'm like, I did not think this was possible. Like,
Move over, Daffy.
He's got fucking Bishonen hair.
Bishonen duck. All right, well, on that note, that's the opposite of censor duck, I guess. I'm going to go around one more time to get everyone's favorite Miyazaki film. So you got to pick one. So Anna, you first.
Put me on the spot. Let's just go with Tried and True, and it has Russian Baba Yaga in it for whatever reason, or Baba Yaga as we would say it. Let's go Spirited Away.
Okay, Spirited Away. You can always change this at a future date. Allison.
Princess Mononoke or Nausicaa wins.
You got to pick one.
Princess Mononoke. Princess Mononoke.
Mononoke. Mike, have you seen any of these films?
You haven't asked me anything yet, have you? I don't think I've ever watched a Miyazaki film with the sound on.
All right, so we'll take
most of them in the background while getting really drunk.
Yeah. So we'll go with your Dark Side of the Rainbow version. And which one of those would you pick?
I don't know.
Okay. I'll come back to you. Or we'll leave it.
Do they blend into a slurry?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the mise en scène, if you will. I'm familiar with the aesthetic. I have no idea what's going on in anything. All very cute, though. Carry on.
They're very visual, though, so I can understand that. Rachel?
Oh, God. I'm going to stay with Nausicaa. Also, the soundtrack by Joe Hisaishi is really stunning. He does all the music for different Miyazaki films, and it's definitely something that needs to be experienced in Japanese with the proper inflection. Don't you fucking dare watch it dubbed.
Why would you ever? Why would you ever?
Don't you do it.
Why would you? Speaking of which, Howl's was the weirdest shit because of that. Because I always watch it
Christian
subtitled,
Bale.
but they all look very like European, and you have these like super Japanese voices voicing these European-looking characters, and it was fucking bizarre.
It wasn't bizarre for me because the alternative was listening to Howl be voiced by Christian Bale. That was the alternative.
What? No, there's no alternative. That's subtitles are bust.
I know, exactly.
Okay.
When it comes to Miyazaki films, I mean, you can just fuck around with other anime if you choose. Don't you dare fucking do it with Miyazaki. They have like the best fucking Japanese voice actors that they've got doing this stuff, and they work their asses off. So seriously,
Miyazaki puts out quality.
Ghost in the
Brian,
Shell
what's your
and
favorite?
Ren are the only
What's
ones.
your favorite, Brian?
My favorite is, well, as gorgeous as I think Spirited Away is, and I love the story, and Mononoke and Nausicaa, I'm going to pick Grave of the Fireflies. I think that is just such a powerful, powerful film. And I watched it last night to refresh myself, and I love it just as much. As depressing as it is, I love a good depressing story. So I'm going to go Grave of the Fireflies. That's going to be my choice. And if you haven't seen it, see it. Just keep a box of Kleenex nearby, because it's fucking... It's, it's got feels written all over it. So...
It's got the feels.
Oh, yeah, it's got feels. You're going to be going on a field trip. So we're going to wrap it up and call it. Somebody got mad because we didn't say Castle in the Sky. I'm sorry, that's great.
Yeah, I've seen Laputa Castle in the Sky. I mean, if it hadn't been for Ponyo, I would have said that on my list of films, that I kind of my lesser favorite Miyazaki, that would be on it, if only because the pacing is a little bit off in places, and that's really the thing that trips up the story, unfortunately. But it's still a good story.
They're all good. I mean, I love Lupin the Third, and I'm sad that I couldn't say without a shadow of the doubt that Lupin the Third, Castle Cagliostro will be my favorite, but it doesn't, as good as that is, and as good as the other ones were, they just don't compare to my...
Yeah, there's also The Cat Returns, and there's a lot of the other larger Studio Ghibli films that weren't made by Miyazaki himself. Like A Whisper of the Heart is really great. Also, Poko is something that's definitely you should definitely watch. That one actually was a Miyazaki film though.
Okay.
Yeah, but if you want to see you are going to have an interesting experience watching Poko, because you're going to realize that in the subtitles or that they've done for it, they say it's their pouch, but that's really their testicles inflating.
Oh, nice.
They basically have magic testicles.
Mm.
They're raccoons with giant fucking testicles.
Magic nuts.
Crystal balls.
Giant magic nuts.
Oh yes.
Okay.
I know. Yes. Okay. So we're gonna try to wrap it up for sure. So thank you guys for listening to us ramble and nerd out on Ghibli films. We'll see you next podcast with more interesting nerdy topics. Do we want to? Yeah, do we want to do that?
I think it's good to. We're going to need to do the shilling now because we have something to shill.
Okay.
So if you want to help us out, and if you have been waiting for a chance to just do a one-time donation to a project that we're putting on, we are going to be going to the Calgary Comics and Entertainment Expo. Currently, myself, Sage, Karen, Mike. Are all paid. Well, we're basically paying for ourselves, but we have Hannah, Anna, Cherry, Rachel, and Brian, who we want to be able to bring as well. And unfortunately, they are not able to pay their own way. So we are putting on a fundraiser to get them there so we can get all of us there. And when we're there, we will be doing all kinds of activities together and videotaping. So we'll have a DVD available to those people who contribute so you can see all of our shenanigans that we get up to. And generally, there are a lot of shenanigans in general. But so if that's something that you want to see happen, then please do point your browsers to www.feedthebadger/projects/ just a second, I need to get this right, so I need to open it up. Doopity-doo.
Well, do you have it?
The U.S. transplant. Sorry, we're such a bother.
Yeah, I know. What do you mean such a bother?
Which I'm just super excited about, by the way.
Okay, so here we go. Sorry about this, guys. So it's www.feedthebadger.com/projects/Badgers Gone Wild Calgary Expo Style. And that's Badgers Gone Wild Calgary Expo Style. And please do direct your browsers to that. And we are essentially going to go there and we are going to proselytize the message of leaving nerds and geeks and creators the fuck alone, and not trying to control their creations, not trying to go in and dictate how they associate, how they interact, and all that kind of good stuff. Just we're all for the free range geekery. So if that's something you want to advocate for, then please do consider throwing us a few shekels. And I'll throw it back to Brian to send us out.
Okay, so thank you, Allison. Yes, I'd like to go, and that'd be cool. But we'll see what happens. And you guys in the comments section, or if anybody hears this, I want to know what your favorite Studio Ghibli film is. If you agree with anything that we said, if not, if you have any additional information, maybe we didn't know, feel free to add that as a comment. And I don't think Steam Boy counts, because even though it looks like it, I don't think it's a Studio Ghibli film, but I could be wrong. So with that said, it isn't? No, I didn't think it was, but it looks like it is. So Steam Boy doesn't count. So leave a comment, and we'll talk to you next time.